Hi and welcome to the School Shorts podcast. If you're finding these episodes useful, I would love your support with a wee subscribe and a review wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Melissa Chan Green, journalist and mum of two. With the episode, I feel like we need a little drum roll for or something, because we're talking about basically the Oscars of the museum world, and the International Exhibition of the Year award has just gone to Motat, the Museum of Transport and Technology in little old Auckland, New Zealand. It's a big deal for the museum, and it's cool because it means we're talking about STEM subjects, which have been on the decline in New Zealand in terms of enrolment for many years. In fact, at senior level, achievement in maths and physics has decreased by 20%. So what more can we be doing as parents and as teachers to encourage engagement in STEM subjects? Well, here's Julie Baker, the education lead for Motat. Julie Baker, thank you so much for your time on School Shorts today. I am a big Motat fan. I have been for some time, as my family is as well. You must have one of the most fun jobs being there. Tell me about what it is that you do.
So, kia ora, Mel, and thank you for having me. I'm the head of education at Motat. So I have a team of educators that are in charge of making sure that the school groups that come on site have a really cool experience while they're at the museum. But we also have outreach programs where we go out into schools and we take the museum experience out to them. So, yeah, it's one of those jobs where, you know, you go in the morning thinking you're going to be doing X, Y, and Z, and you end up doing, you know, A, B, and C, and it's all very cool, fun stuff. Yeah.
Well, I guess that's the cool thing about science and inquiry and experimentation. That's where things can take you.
That's right.
In terms of your path, what has led you here? Have you always been interested in STEM subjects, or?
Yeah, I come from a family that were always very much into making things. So, you know, my mother was, a traditional person who she knitted and she sewed and she baked and, you know, she did all of those sorts of things for the family. And then my father was a cabinet maker, very talented cabinet maker. And he used to get involved in sort of like marquetry and making beautiful furniture. And so I've come from that background where, you know, things were being made all of the time. And as a child, I kind of did a bit of everything, really. You know, I used to work with my father in his workshop, and, you know, Mum made sure that she taught us all of those kind of making skills as well. And I think that's probably where it started. There was no sort of like moment of I'm going to be an engineer. But I think that kind of background of making things and learning about how things fit together and how, you know, the strength of materials and all those sorts of things all fed into a decision that I made to go into mechanical engineering, which I did. It was my first job out of school. I was extremely lucky that I worked in a company called Department of Scientific and Industrial Research, which was DSIR, and I was in a role as an engineering technician. And I was given the opportunity to get involved in projects that were unique around New Zealand, and they had resources which were quite unique for me to use as well. So, for example, one of the projects I was involved in was the Auckland Harbour Bridge. At the time when I was in that role, it had just started to develop fatigue cracks. And they were very concerned that it was going to, you know, tumble into the harbour. And I was part of a team that were involved in going into the bridge inside the structure and strain gauging it and doing some sort of like dynamic stress measurements on the
Goodness,
structure.
That sounds risky. You're a brave person.
That's what I mean. It was sort of like a very, very unique opportunity. And I'm extremely grateful for that because it was, such an exciting job to have. Like a lot of...
Did you solve those issues? Is that the follow-up question I should ask?
It's still there. Hasn't fallen over yet. As a result of that job, I did what a lot of women do, I think, when in their careers, is when I had children, I went into education because that allowed me a bit of flexibility around, you know, school holidays and looking after children and things like that. So I went into secondary school teaching as a physics teacher, which really directly related to the mechanical engineering experience that I had. I worked in a school system for a number of years, and then about that time the technology curriculum was coming out, and I got into a ministry contract to help get that technology curriculum sort of socialised in schools, so schools were able to pick up teaching it. And then, sort of I've been in various parts of the education system throughout, from that time onwards. So I've worked in tertiary education, I've worked in primary schools and high schools and things like that. I ended up at Motat 10 years ago. It felt at the time as though it was an opportunity for me to take up a role that brought together the different parts of my background experience, my engineering experience, my education experience, and also I had done a Masters of Management at the University of Auckland, and that management kind of idea of things as well. So it kind of was a nice bringing together of all of those threads.
All of the strands, yeah. And you've just been involved in a very exciting project, one that has been recognised on the world stage in the International Exhibition of the Year Award for museums, which is a big deal, and an exhibition from Motat has won. Tell us about that.
How exciting. Yes, it's we're joking about it being the Oscars of the museum world. So it was the Museums and Heritage Award, and we won the category for the International Exhibition of the Year, which I still am a little bit like, wow, that's so amazing, We were up against some, very strong competition. The group of finalists were very well-respected museums around the world. So, for example, there was the Grand Egypt Museum was one of them. Another one was the Museum of Pop Culture in Seattle. So, we're talking huge organisations, great big budget places. And yes, little old Motat at the bottom of the world won that exhibition award.
Now, if you haven't been to Motat for some time, some people, there's a kind of misconception that there's some trams and there's some old cars. And, I said at the beginning that we go there frequently as a family, so I have seen it change quite dramatically recently. And so tell us about the particular exhibition that has won and the ideas behind it.
Yeah. So the exhibition is called Te Puawānanga. It is a science and technology centre, and the idea behind it, there were lots of sort of things that fed into the vision, but we wanted to create a science and technology centre for Aotearoa, New Zealand, the playground for science and technology in New Zealand. That was sort of the overarching vision, and then underneath that, there were all these other things that we wanted it to be. So we talked a lot about it, it needed to be hands-on, and it needed to be fun, and it needed to just be an enticing offer for children to come in and get stuck in, be engaging for them. We wanted it to be specifically of Aotearoa, New Zealand. So we were very keen to work with iwi and advisors to make sure that it spoke to Te Ao Māori as well as Western science. So we wanted the two sort of knowledge systems to kind of sit beside each other, not in competition, but just alongside each other. So we were delivering that message that, there are different knowledge systems present in our country here, and you can draw on both of them to inform your own worldview.
That can be quite controversial in some circles.
Absolutely. We realised that it was an area that, was could be potentially controversial, which was why we were very careful to make sure that we were working with all sorts of different advisors across the iwi. So, for example, Peter Ture was one of the people that we worked with, and he was just a wonderful resource. He really got what we were trying to achieve and was able to kind of, point us in the right direction and give us that really good support and guidance.
Yeah. So, there's, a strain on funding across many sectors, and to be able to create those kinds of exhibitions, you need that funding. How important is it that we continue to fund arts and culture and science in a time when there is that pressure and the battle across many sectors.
Yeah, and particularly coming from an education background, we currently have a big focus on numeracy and literacy, and teachers are being charged with delivering curriculum items around that, and I think naturally as a result of that there is less attention being paid to science and technology within the New Zealand curriculum. It's hugely important. We cannot afford as a nation to turn our back on any particular discipline in favour of another for an extended period of time. So we want to, create a nation of innovators. We want our children to look at our history of innovation in New Zealand, which we punch well above our weight, on the global stage there, and to be able to see themselves in that capacity. And to do that, they need to start off with this interest in and curiosity about science and technology. So I think it's hugely important.
What do you think of our number 8 wire mindset in New Zealand? And do you think we still have that mindset?
I do. I love it, quite frankly. It's a big part of one of the programs that we are offering in the Motat education called the Innovation Forge. And just getting students to look at the world around them and their communities and identify problems that could be solved. And it could be, a huge problem, big meaty problem, or it could be just a tiny little problem that, I'm really annoyed when I have to do whatever it is I have to do. I need to find a different way to do that. And that really does spring from that, our history of that. New Zealanders are good at looking at that and thinking, hang on a minute, I think there's a better way we could do that. Let's kind of develop something that solves that problem for us.
We were talking in the car the other day, it was raining. My son, he's 5, he said, why don't they have windscreen wipers on the side so I can look out the window? Yep. We were like, well, it's probably a commercial, financial decision. Do we want to go into that with you? But we thought, well, how would you fix that?
Yes.
And it just brought up a really cool discussion.
Absolutely, yeah. And those, that's a wonderful experience. He's found a problem. He's kind of thinking there's a solution to the problem, and you're thinking from your perspective, there's probably lots of reasons why that hasn't happened. But, that discussion that you've had is all kind of part of his developing his understanding of, technological practice, product development, who stakeholders are and problems, all of those really good design thinking stages,
What do we know about our children's interest, or I guess our teachers' interest too, in science and technology subjects? You must have seen that change over the years. What are your observations?
Unfortunately, there hasn't been much change. It seems to be a fairly consistent thing. I was listening to one of your podcasts earlier. It was the gentleman who was talking about teacher maths anxiety, so Daniel Ansari.
Yes.
And I really love that term, maths anxiety. And I was thinking of it as in the science and technology context, and I was thinking about it from a teacher's perspective, because I think teachers have anxiety about science and technology. There's a research out there that shows that we have actually got a fairly low percentage of teachers in primary schools who come from a science specialisation. And we have an even lower percentage of teachers that will talk about using scientific concepts regularly in their teaching. And I think that speaks to, just the sort of level of anxiety around, I'm not quite comfortable about teaching it, so I'm going to sort of be a little bit reserved about it. And that was actually one of the reasons that one of the visions, if you like, for Te Puawānanga, we wanted to create a resource that would support teachers and help them kind of reduce that barrier to them participating. So we saw the centre as a place where, students could come in and they have this great experience. It's all hands-on and it's loud and it's noisy and, they're really engaged. But we're hoping also that it's sparking some questions for them so that, they go back and they're talking to the teacher about, why did that do that and what was that all about? And it doesn't matter if the teacher doesn't know the answer, because what happens then is some really good learning alongside the students.
Well, that's the great thing about science, because as a teacher or as a parent, you can go, wow, what do you think?
That's right. You don't need to know the answers. Let's find out together.
Yes,
totally.
This is a great inquiry. Yeah. We'll find out together.
That's right.
And you pointed out maths anxiety there, and I think one of the important things that I learnt in that discussion was that a teacher or a parent's anxiety, and especially if it's expressed with your children, can have a very early impact on how they feel about it, and then there is evidence that goes on to impact their actual achievement in it.
That's right.
And so I wouldn't think, and I haven't seen if there's any evidence, but I wouldn't think it would be that much difference in science.
Absolutely. It absolutely relates to science and technology as well. If you receive a message that, this is not something that your role model is comfortable in, or your teacher is comfortable in, and then you sort of just you absorb that osmosis, it just kind of happens. And so it does create that sort of latent sort of feeling about the subject. So, wanting teachers to kind of lean into it a little bit more and be comfortable with not always knowing the answer, and just be okay about going out there and giving it a go and finding out things alongside their students, It's important.
If you are wanting to do something fun at home with your kids in the kind of science vein, and I don't know, maybe it's school holidays, maybe it's just the weekend, do you have an idea?
I do, actually. I was thinking about that as I was coming in. I come from a technology education background, so as you know, we're always looking for design challenges, that sort of thing. And one of the things that parents could do at home very easily with the items in their pantry would be to say to their children, let's make a new biscuit. Let's design a new biscuit, right? Biscuits are all sort of the same basic ingredients. You've got some flour and you've got some eggs and you've got some sugar, maybe a bit of milk, maybe some cocoa to flavour it. But let's kind of start with just those basics and then see where it can go to. And students, and you'd have to step back. You'd have to make sure that you didn't say, here's the recipe, follow it, right? And then your children can have a go. What happens when we put too much flour in? What happens when the mixture's not moist enough, or when it's too moist? What happens when there's no raising agent? We haven't got any baking powder in there. What happens when we put far too many chocolate chips in there?
I guarantee you that will be an experiment that they'll be happy to try.
Really, really good science experimentation, though. We follow a process, we have a result, and then we kind of, realise that this was not so great or that was not so great. But then it also extends into technology education, in that you can have your children go out and say, get some feedback. What do you think about these biscuits? Oh, they're not crunchy enough. I don't like that, And that's kind of, that's what we call stakeholders. And when you're developing a product, stakeholders are incredibly important, because you have to have your stakeholders liking the product before you're ever going to go out there to be able to market it.
So we're talking business too, you know, and I guess if you're trying to get kids interested in science, and you can explain that they could potentially make money off it, I mean, that's going to pique their interest.
Absolutely. And it's very realistic as well. There are plenty of young New Zealanders out there who have had a good idea and turned it into a product and are actually selling their product.
Yeah, totally. Okay. Now, some secret tips from Motat, or fun things that people should look out for from an insider's perspective.
Okay, from inside the Te Puawānanga, the centre?
Yeah.
So we have, there's the permanent exhibition. That's the kind of environment that we've created, and there's lots of fun hands-on activities there for students to get engaged in. But of equal importance is what we call the programming, that is the layer of activation that sits on top of that. So we always wanted Te Puawānanga to be a centre for people like scientists and technologists to come in and engage with the public and show them their practice. What are we doing in this space?
So each time you go in, you're probably going to see new things then.
Absolutely.
There's new people showcasing.
Absolutely. Cool. And it could be anything from, a chemist working at the University of Auckland demonstrating some some really cool chemistry, or some really what people wouldn't perceive necessarily as technology or science. It could be a local cottage industry that are doing some weaving, some harakeke weaving or something like that. It's all tech practice.
I came in once and there was glow-in-the-dark knit
I
powder.
knits.
Yeah.
That's right.
And I thought, wow, I mean, this is kind of gross but also really interesting.
Yeah. And probably, maybe quite topical at the time as well.
Yeah.
So there's just a wide range of things that you could have, and our vision is to have it as kind of the nexus for people to come in and demonstrate their stuff and have public engagement with their work. So that's always going on. We're about to have our school holiday program, our July holiday program, and this item here is a truss bridge. It is the topic of our school holiday program is called Unders and Overs. It's about bridges and tunnels. And so your children can come in and they can get some really cool hands-on experiences around building different bridges and then experimenting them in terms of, what kind of load can it hold in the centre and of those kinds of things. So this is actually a little product called Constructables. And it's just a neat little kit that has all of the bits and pieces in it to actually make a truss bridge, which is what we're looking at there. But a really good start for children who've kind of they like building things, like putting together models. So that's something that will be in the Holics program this July. There are also plenty of other challenges around constructing bridges out of different materials, non-traditional materials, like make a paper bridge and things like that.
Cool.
Good fun.
Yeah, and what we're looking at is something that you could, it's not particularly large. Kids could make this at home in their bedroom and play with their cars through it, or you could make all sorts of things out of it. But that's really cool.
Yeah.
And is this from New Zealand?
It is. The gentleman who's created, this is a business that is just newly launched as well. So he pulled together this kit because he's a civil engineer and he does bridges, and he has got all of the contacts and the supply chain sorted out for his little component parts. He's working with Motat to look at how we can extend the starting product to be able to build different types of bridges. There's lots of different types of bridges, and have it more sort of like more flexible in terms of what students can build with it. It's got really good positioning within the school market as well, because it's actually a good price point.
Yeah,
for a school
amazing.
resource.
Okay, well, thank you very much for telling us about that. If anyone is listening and is going to get along to Motat these school holidays, if you're watching or listening to this podcast as it goes out live, then you may very well see me and my family, and maybe you, Julie.
Making bridges, yes.
Thank you again for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mel.
Thanks so much for tuning in today. If that topic was helpful for you and you'd like to hear more, please do like and subscribe. It sends me that feedback. School Shorts is all about supporting busy parents who want their children to thrive. Follow on social at School Shorts NZ for fun ideas, helpful resources, and exclusive giveaways.